Just wait in the lobby, Mom. We'll come get you as soon as the family photos are done. That's what my son said to me. Not a whisper, not an apology tucked underneath the words, just a fact, delivered like a reminder about picking up dry cleaning. I stood in the marble lobby of the Harrington Grand, a hotel I had never been inside before, a hotel I could never have afforded on my own, and I watched the elevator doors close in front of me. Through the gap, for just a second, I could see my son's back. He didn't turn around. I found a chair near the window, one of those high-backed chairs covered in cream-colored fabric that looks expensive but isn't particularly comfortable. I sat down, placed my purse on my lap, and I waited. That was at 6:45 in the evening. By 9 o'clock, no one had come. I should tell you something about myself first, because none of this makes sense without it. My name is June. I'm 64 years old. I spent 31 years teaching third grade at Lincoln Elementary in Dayton, Ohio, the same school where my son learned to read, the same school where I once helped him sound out the word butterfly on a Tuesday morning in October. I retired 3 years ago with a modest pension, a ceramic apple from the PTA, and more memories than I know what to do with. I raised my son alone. His father left when he was 4, not dramatically, not with a fight that shook the walls. He simply packed a bag on a Wednesday afternoon and didn't come back. I came home from work to find a note on the kitchen counter and a half-eaten sandwich in the refrigerator, as if he couldn't even be bothered to finish his lunch before he walked out of our lives. I never remarried. I thought about it once or twice when my son was in middle school and I was tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. But I never did. I poured everything I had, every dollar, every evening, every ounce of energy I had left after a full day of other people's children, into raising mine. His name is Andrew, and I loved him the way only a mother who has done it alone truly knows how to love. Completely, sometimes recklessly, always at a cost I didn't stop to calculate. When Andrew was accepted to Ohio State, I cried in the parking lot of the Kroger on 5th Street. Happy tears, the kind that surprise you. He was the first person in our family to go to a 4-year university, and I wanted him to have every chance I hadn't. So I dipped into the small savings account I'd been building since he was 7. I paid his first 2 years of tuition out of pocket, about $38,000 in total, while working a second job on weekends at a garden center, selling mulch and potting soil to people who had no idea the woman ringing them up was also a school teacher 5 days a week. He graduated. He got a job at a law firm in Columbus. I stood in that gymnasium and clapped until my hands ached. I thought, this is it? This is what it was all for. He met her during his second year at the firm. Her name was Brielle. She was sharp and polished in the way of someone who had grown up with money. Not cruel, exactly, but accustomed to a certain kind of order. The kind of order that categorizes people. I noticed it the first time Andrew brought her home for Thanksgiving. She moved through my house the way someone moves through a hotel room they've been assigned, rather than chosen. Politely, carefully, without touching anything she didn't have to. She called me June from the beginning, which is fine. I know some people prefer that, but there was something in the way she said it, precisely, without warmth, that made it feel less like familiarity and more like a boundary. Andrew didn't notice. Or if he did, he chose not to say anything. That was a habit he had developed gradually, the way water erodes stone, so slowly you don't see it happening until the shape has already changed. The first time I really felt it was Christmas, 2 years into their relationship. I had driven up to Columbus, 3 hours in my old Civic, which had been making a sound in the left front wheel that I'd been meaning to have looked at, with a trunk full of gifts and a casserole dish wrapped in foil. Brielle's parents were there. They had flown in from Scottsdale, and they brought a charcuterie board the size of a coffee table and 2 bottles of wine that cost more than my electric bill. I was seated at the far end of the table, near the kitchen, where the draft was. After dinner, when her father made a toast, he mentioned Brielle by name. He mentioned Andrew by name. He thanked them for their beautiful home and their generous hospitality. He looked right past me. I helped clear the plates. I washed the casserole dish by hand because I wasn't sure if it was dishwasher safe. Andrew came into the kitchen once briefly to refill his wine glass. "You doing okay, Mom?" he asked. "I'm fine," I said. "Go be with your guests." He did. They got engaged the following spring. Andrew called me on a Sunday morning, and I could hear the excitement in his voice, that same voice that used to call me from the school office when he'd scraped his knee on the playground. It still did something to me, that voice. It always will. I said all the right things. I was happy for him. I meant it. What I didn't say was that I'd already spent $4,000 that year helping them, 2 car payments when Andrew's transmission went out, a plane ticket to visit Brielle's sister in Portland that they just couldn't swing right now, half the cost of a new sectional sofa because their apartment was too empty. I didn't say it because I didn't want to be that mother. The one who keeps score, the one who keeps score, the one who makes love feel like a ledger. The wedding planning started immediately. Brielle had a vision. She had always had a vision, and the vision was expensive. The venue alone was $12,000. Her parents contributed generously. Andrew asked me if I could help with the catering deposit. $7,000. I said yes. I said it without hesitation, the way I had always said yes, because saying yes was the only language I had ever known when it came to him. The save the dates arrived in early October. I got mine in the mail, a thick cream envelope with gold lettering, which I thought was a lovely touch. I opened it at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. It listed the ceremony location, the chapel at Hartwell Estate in Dublin, Ohio. Beautiful place. I had driven past it once. It listed the reception location, the Harrington Grand Hotel, downtown Columbus. It listed the date, the 14th of June, my birthday as it happened, though I doubted that was intentional. What it did not list, what I only found out when I asked Andrew directly 2 weeks later, was where I would be sitting during the reception. "We've got a seating arrangement worked out," he said. "It's a small venue, Mom. Limited seats in the main ballroom. You'll be at a table in the mezzanine. It's actually really nice up there." I asked if the mezzanine was part of the reception. There was a pause, brief, but I noticed it. I had been noticing pauses in my son's voice for about 3 years by then. "It's adjacent," he said. "You'll be able to hear the speeches." I didn't push. I told myself it was fine. I told myself I was being sensitive. I had a remarkable talent, developed over decades of telling myself exactly that, for talking myself out of what I already knew. The morning of the wedding, I put on the dress I'd bought from Dillard's in April. It was navy blue with small pearl buttons at the cuff. Not flashy, but I felt like myself in it. I had my hair done at the salon on Maple Street, the one run by a woman named Loretta, who had been cutting my hair since Bill Clinton was president. She told me I looked beautiful, and I believed her, which was probably the high point of the entire day. I drove myself to the chapel. I sat in a pew near the back, not because anyone told me to, but because when I arrived, the front pews on the groom's side already had reserved signs on them, and when I asked the usher if one of those was for me, he checked his clipboard and said, quietly, that my name wasn't on the list for the reserved section. I said that was fine. I sat near the back. Andrew looked handsome. He really did. Standing at the altar in his dark suit, waiting for Brielle. I watched him and I thought about the morning I tied his shoes for the last time. He must have been 5, maybe 6, and how he'd said, "I can do it myself, Mom." And I had felt proud and sad at the same time in a way I couldn't explain then and still can't entirely now. Brielle was stunning. I will say that honestly. Whatever else I feel about the way things unfolded, she was a beautiful bride. When the ceremony ended, a coordinator in a black blazer moved through the pews, directing people toward the shuttle buses that would take guests to the Harrington Grand. When she got to my row, she hesitated. "You're Andrew's mother?" she asked, though she said it the way people say things they already know the answer to. "I am," I said. "So there's been a slight adjustment to the plan," she said. "The shuttle is at capacity. We have a car that will come for you. It should be about 45 minutes. You're welcome to wait in the lobby of the hotel. Andrew said he'd have someone come find you once the family portraits are done. I looked at her. She had the look of someone who had been asked to deliver a message she hadn't written and didn't entirely agree with. The lobby, I said. Yes, ma'am, it's very comfortable. There's a seating area right by the entrance. I nodded. I thanked her, which I've since thought about more than I'd like to admit. The fact that I thanked her. The lobby of the Harrington Grand was, as promised, comfortable. There were chairs and a small table with a vase of white orchids. A pianist was playing something soft and classical near the bar. The ceiling was high, and the light from the chandeliers was warm and golden. I sat in the chair nearest the window. I placed my purse in my lap. I waited. People moved past me in elegant clusters. Guests heading upstairs, staff with trays, a young couple who laughed at something between them. No one spoke to me. I was simply a woman in a navy dress, sitting in a chair in a hotel lobby, and in the grand choreography of that evening, I had been assigned no other role. At 7:15, I texted Andrew, just checking in, still in the lobby. He replied 11 minutes later, almost done! So sorry. Brielle's family is taking a while. Hang tight. I hung tight. At 8, I texted again. Should I head up? No reply for 23 minutes. Then, reception is in full swing. It's kind of crazy up here. Someone will come get you soon, promise. I looked at those words for a long time. Someone will come get you. Not, I'm coming. Not, give me 5 minutes. Someone. Unspecified. Eventually. I put my phone in my purse. At 8:40, a hotel employee, young, probably 23, with kind eyes and the slightly overwhelmed expression of someone working a double shift, came over and asked if I needed anything. No, I said. Thank you. I'm waiting for my son. She nodded and walked away. Then she came back with a glass of water and set it on the table beside me without saying anything, and I appreciated that more than I could explain. At 9:15, I stood up. I straightened my dress. I picked up my purse. I looked at the elevator for a moment, the elevator that led upstairs, to the ballroom, to the music and the laughter and the tables full of people who had been invited to witness the beginning of my son's marriage. Then I walked to the front entrance and I asked the doorman to call me a cab. I didn't cry on the drive home. I'm not sure why. I think I was too tired. Or too some feeling I didn't have a name for yet. I sat in the back of that cab and watched the Columbus skyline go by, and I thought about a lot of things. I thought about the $7,000. I thought about the Christmas dinner where I sat near the kitchen draft. I thought about every phone call I'd answered on the first ring for the past 38 years, because I never wanted him to feel, not for a single moment, that he couldn't reach me. I thought about what I had said to him once when he was about 9 years old and had been unkind to a boy in his class. I had sat him down at the kitchen table and I had said, "The way you treat people when it costs you nothing tells me everything about who you're becoming." He had looked at me with those serious brown eyes and nodded like he understood. I thought about that for a long time. I got home just before 10. I changed out of my dress very carefully and hung it in the closet. I made a cup of chamomile tea. I sat at the kitchen table in the same chair where I had opened the save the date, and I thought about what I was going to do next. Not out of anger. Anger was there, yes, low and quiet, like a pilot light. But what was bigger than anger, what was sitting right in the center of my chest, pressing outward, was something closer to clarity. I had spent 38 years being the person who showed up. I had spent 38 years making sure he never had to wait, and on the night he began a new chapter of his life, he had asked me to sit in a lobby and wait for someone, unspecified, eventual, to come get me. I thought, I've been waiting my whole life? And I thought, I don't think I'll do that anymore. Andrew called the next morning at 10:17. I know the exact time because I looked at the clock when my phone rang and I stood there for 3 full rings deciding whether to answer. I answered. "Mom, I am so sorry about last night." He sounded genuinely distressed. I will give him that. It was chaotic and things got away from us, and I should have come down myself. I know that. Brielle feels terrible. I let him finish. Did you have a good time, though, once you got up there? There was a silence. I didn't go up, I said. What? I waited until 9:15. No one came, so I went home. The silence on his end was different from my silence. His had surprise in it. Mine was just quiet. Mom, why didn't you text me? I did text you, Andrew, twice. I know, things were so crazy. The speeches ran long, and Brielle's aunt had a whole thing. I know, I said. I understand it was a busy night. Mom, I'm really sorry. Can we, can we do a dinner? This week? Make it up to you? I thought about dinner. I thought about sitting across from him and Brielle at some restaurant, eating a meal where everyone is very careful about what they say, where we all agree without speaking, to forgive and move forward and not examine anything too closely. I don't think dinner is what I need right now, I said. Then what do you need? It was, I realized, the first time in several years that he had asked me that question. I need some time, I said. I need to think. He said he understood. I'm not sure he did, but he said it. In the weeks that followed, I did a few things. I called my financial advisor, a steady and practical woman named Doris, who I had worked with for 11 years, and I reviewed my accounts. I had a small retirement fund, my pension, the equity in my house. Not a fortune, but something. Something I had built, carefully, over a long time. I also looked at my records of what I had given Andrew over the past 6 years. I hadn't tracked it meticulously. I'm not that kind of person. But between the tuition assistance, the car payments, the security deposit on his first apartment, the catering contribution, and a handful of other things I'd said yes to without thinking too carefully, it came to just under $60,000. I sat with that number for a while. I wasn't angry at the number. I had given that money freely, and I would not take back the giving of it. But I understood something, looking at it plainly. I had spent years trying to purchase a closeness that should have been free, and it had not worked. You cannot pay your way into being seen. I started doing some things for myself, small things at first. I joined a walking group on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. 6 women who met at the park on Sycamore and walked 3 miles in all weather, talking about everything and nothing. I took a watercolor class at the community center, even though I was quite bad at it. I started cooking dinners. I actually wanted to eat. Instead of making large batches of things I thought Andrew might like if he happened to stop by. I started sleeping better. That surprised me more than anything. It was about 2 months later that Andrew showed up at my door unannounced. A Sunday afternoon in August, I was on the porch with a glass of iced tea and a library book when his car pulled into the driveway. He looked tired. Something in his face had changed. Not dramatically, but enough that I noticed. I put my book down. "Do you want some tea?" He sat in the other porch chair. He took the tea. He didn't say anything for a while, and I didn't push him. I had always been too quick to fill his silences for him. I was learning not to do that. "She's not happy with me," he finally said. I waited. "Brielle, she said I've been distracted, that I've been off ever since the wedding." He paused. "I think she means since you went home." "What do you think?" I asked. He put his elbows on his knees. He looked out at the yard, at the old maple tree he used to climb, at the garden bed where I still grew tomatoes every summer. "I think I knew it was wrong," he said. "That night, I knew when I got on that shuttle and you weren't on it. I told myself it would be fine, that you'd understand, that you always understand, that you always understand." He said that last part quietly, like he was only now hearing what it meant. "I do understand a lot," I said. "I've made a practice of it." "I know. But understanding something and accepting it are different things. I spent a lot of years confusing those two." He nodded. He was quiet for a moment, then he said, "I don't know how to fix this, Mom." "You start by not asking me to wait in lobbies," I said, simply, without venom. He looked up at me then, and for a moment he looked like he was 9 years old again, sitting at the kitchen table, being told that the way you treat people when it costs you nothing tells you everything. "I'm sorry," he said, and this time it didn't sound like the apology you give when you want the conversation to be over. It sounded like the beginning of one. "I'm not going to tell you that everything was fixed after that afternoon. Life isn't a movie, and I'm too old to pretend otherwise." Things between Andrew and me moved slowly, cautiously, like two people feeling their way across a floor in the dark, making sure each step holds before trusting the next. There were difficult conversations. There was one dinner where Brielle said something defensive and I said something direct, and we both sat with the discomfort of it instead of smoothing it over, which was new for all of us. But there was also a Tuesday in September when Andrew called me on his lunch break, not to ask for anything, not to apologize again, just to tell me he'd been thinking about something I said. He didn't even tell me what it was. He just said he'd been thinking, and then we talked for 20 minutes about nothing important, about the maple tree and the tomatoes and whether I'd tried the new bakery on 5th Street. It was the best phone call we'd had in years. I have learned some things I wish I had known earlier. That love given with no boundary teaches the people we love that we have no edges, that they can push and we will simply expand to accommodate them. That isn't love. Or rather, it is love, but it is love missing the part where you also matter. I have learned that dignity is not something other people grant you. You carry it yourself, or it doesn't get carried. I have learned that sitting in a hotel lobby for 2.5 hours in a navy blue dress can, if you let it, be the moment everything changes. Not because of what it took from you, but because of what it finally made clear. I walked out of that lobby on my own 2 feet. I drove myself home. I made myself a cup of tea. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't wait for anyone's permission to feel like I was enough. I still think about that cream-colored chair by the window sometimes, the orchids on the table, the pianist playing something soft that no one was really listening to. I sat there for 2.5 hours dressed in my best, and not a single person who shared my last name came through those doors to find me. For a long time, I would have told you that was the worst part of the night. Now I'm not sure it was. The worst part, if I'm being honest with myself, started much earlier. It started every time I said yes when I should have said, "Let's talk about this." Every time I wrote a check to smooth something over. Every time I confused being needed with being valued. What happened to Andrew didn't come out of nowhere. That's the thing about the way we treat the people closest to us. It builds, quietly, over years, in small choices that seem harmless on their own. A seating arrangement here, a shuttle bus there, a text that takes 23 minutes to answer. Each one a small signal, and I received every one of them and told myself I was reading them wrong. I wasn't reading them wrong. I just wasn't ready to read them at all. I think about the kind of mother I tried to be, and I think the heart of it was right, but the execution got away from me somewhere. I wanted him to know he was loved unconditionally. What I didn't understand until much later is that unconditional love still has to come from a person who knows her own worth. Otherwise, it isn't really love you're giving, it's just fear with a pretty name on it. Fear that if you stop, they'll go. Fear that if you ask for something back, you'll seem ungrateful for the privilege of having them at all. What I've come to understand, slowly, the way you understand things that cost you something, is that genuine love has to come from a place of clarity, not desperation. Andrew didn't learn to see me because I made myself invisible for his comfort. He started to see me the afternoon he sat on my porch and said out loud what he already knew. That took something from him. It took honesty, and honesty about things we've done wrong is one of the harder things a person can be asked to practice. And I had to find my own kind of honesty too, the kind that says, I participated in this. I taught someone, through years of demonstration, that my presence was optional and my resources were not. That's not blame. It's just cause and effect, and understanding it was the only way I knew to stop the pattern from continuing. The walking group on Tuesday mornings. The watercolor class where I'm still quite terrible. The dinner I make exactly the way I want it, with no extra portions set aside just in case. These are not dramatic acts, but they are mine, and there is something in the doing of small, honest things for yourself. Something that rebuilds a kind of inner steadiness that years of self-erasure can quietly wear away. I walked out of that lobby on my own, and that mattered, not because it punished anyone, but because it was the first decision in a long time that I made entirely for myself, without asking anyone's permission and without waiting to see if it would be approved. I don't know what the next years will look like. I know Andrew and I are finding our way back to something real, slower and more carefully than before, which is probably how it should have been built the first time. I know I am not the same woman who sat in that chair. And I know this. The life you have is largely shaped by what you're willing to ask for, what you're willing to walk away from, and whether you believe, truly, in the quiet of an ordinary Tuesday, that you were worth showing up for all along. I am. I just needed a lobby and a long cab ride home to finally see it clearly.